So this is another short session. We've got 45 minutes, quite a lot to get through, and I'm hoping quite a few questions. So let's just go ahead. All right, so what we're going to do, talk about where we've come from. Gradle plugins, quick summary of how they work today, the different ways you can use them. Just kind of a quick recap. Cover some of the new stuff. Now, when I wrote these slides, I didn't realize we were going to be doing the plugin portal as part of the keynote this morning, so it's hidden in there, and I unveil it at some point, but the kind of magic's gone, I guess. Anyway, so we'll talk more about that. We'll get into more detail about the plugin portal, how it works, how you can be a part of it, and then we're going to talk about where we're going. And to me, that's probably the most exciting thing. We've got some really cool stuff that we can now do now we have that central plugin portal in place. So let's go. Okay, so what are Gradle plugins? Kind of a, you think you might know the answer to this question, but it's a little deeper than what you might think. And if we're going to get, I'm going to talk about the big issues, we may as well get a bit deeper again. What is Gradle, right? In this context of talking about plugins. So the way I think about Gradle at this kind of base level, it Gradles many things to many people, but when you're down at the nuts and bolts of it, Gradle is a dependency management engine. That's something that's fundamental to Gradle. It's a dependency-based execution engine. There's a lot of innovation in the way that it structures things to do. And then from that, it really is just a plugin system and a set of plugins. And really what we think about when we think about Gradle is really the plugins. That's they're the things that we use to get stuff done, right? So plugins are just crucially important to Gradle. And the point I'm trying to make here is that there's no real distinction between sort of core logic or things built in and plugins. Everything is a plugin, except for the dependency management engine and the execution engine. So the Java support is a plugin. Everything is a plugin, essentially. So it's really fundamental. And that's in contrast to some other tools that have a kind of bigger core and a bigger set of things that are just there, and then you plug in around it. Everything in Gradle is a plugin. Even build scripts are plugins. Now, you're shielded from this as a user. You don't think about your build.gradle files as plugins, but actually in terms of implementation and conceptually, they are just plugins. Right? They're the canonical plugin for that particular thing, that particular project or build that you're configuring, but that actually is what they are. There's no difference really between a build script and a script plugin. Right? You do exactly the same things here. So there are these parts of the framework projects, and we just have these little bits of code that contribute to them and get stuff done for us. So we have build scripts, script plugins, we'll show what they are, just a quick recap on them, and binary plugins, what they are as well. You would have, if you've used Gradle at all, you've probably used all of these things. So script plugins, this is how they work today. We say apply from, and we either give some file system path, point to some, that says Groovy there, probably should say Gradle. So the idiomatic thing to do here is to use a .gradle extension on this file, but actually it doesn't matter. I could use .foo there if I want to. Gradle doesn't care. That's just some file containing some Gradle DSL code, and this mechanism is kind of like a mix-in or an include. More or less copy-paste that thing in there and run it. So these are plugins, right? That's just as much a plugin as the plugins binary plugins that we're going to talk about. And we can get it from the file system. We can get it over HTTP. But when we talk about plugins, what you probably usually think of are binary plugins. Right? These are the things when we use apply plugin and things like the Java plugin, etc. So what is a binary plugin really? Well, it's just a very, very simple class wrapper around some build logic. So with a script plugin, our script contains our logic of our plugin. A binary plugin is a very, very simple class wrapper, and our logic goes in here. Right? Who has written a Gradle plugin before? Okay, cool. That's what we'd like to see. So once I have this class wrapper, the other thing I need to do, I don't strictly need to do it, but the idiomatic thing to do, and for convenience is a nice thing to do, is we provide this descriptor, which is really just an indirection between a nice short name for my plugin and the implementation. Right, so I have my class somewhere. Here it's just a Groovy class that I'm building into a jar here. And then also in that same jar, I need this descriptor file. Has one thing in there, says that if somebody wants this plugin, and the ID is derived from this guy here, right? If somebody asks for that, plug in my, this is the implementation. And Gradle will take care of finding that class, instantiating it, and away we go from there. When you're writing a binary plugin, it's just a normal Java project or Groovy project, and you compile against the Gradle API. So you'll have a build script that looks like this. You may not have this guy here if you're writing in Java, but if you're writing in Groovy, you'll just use Gradle's local Groovy, and away you go. Everything else is just like a normal Gradle project. And that's really probably the extent of the development support that we provide today for plugins. And that's going to change with what we're doing. And also, if you are developing plugins, I strongly encourage you to go to Justin Ryan's talk, which I think is later this afternoon, about Nebula, which is a whole suite of things around making plugin development easier, and really the whole life cycle of distributing plugins. So Netflix have many, many Gradle plugins. Okay, so binary plugins. So the state of play today is that if you want to use a binary plugin that isn't part of Gradle core, you have to do this kind of thing. You have to get it on the build script class path somehow. And we use this build script block to denote that. And in here, we just use the standard kind of Gradle dependency management constructs to get those things onto the build script class path. So the same old repositories block here. I can have whatever kind of repositories I want in here. Here we're using JCenter. This could be your internal corporate repository, whatever. And then some Java modules. So Gradle dependency management can handle a few different type of things, but this more or less boils down to some jar and some dependencies, and we're expecting that to contain the plugin we're after. And of course, if we have more jars we want and more plugins, we just have multiple of these guys and potentially multiple of these. Yep, that's how it works today. Plugin discovery. So what do we do today if we need to find a plugin, a Gradle plugin? What are our options? So I need a plugin to do X. You could go to the Gradle plugin wiki page. Who's been there? All right, I apologize. It is terrible. It is beyond terrible, and the fact that I'm very much looking forward to retiring this thing very soon. There'll be a redirect in place to point this thing to plugins.gradle.org. It's slow, it's nasty, it doesn't exist. Go away. Okay, so that popped up, and that's been maintained by the community. Anybody could log in there, add their plugin details. It served us well for a while there, but it wasn't rocking anybody's world. Something else that popped up recently, Andres Almaray, if you've heard of him, quite prolific in the Groovy community. He's a kind of just get it done kind of guy. He got sick of waiting for us, so he just went ahead and built his own plugin system. So this has been quite good. People have been adding their own stuff into here, different plugins, and it's a pull request-based system on GitHub. That's not a bad place to find things as well. No real smarts behind this, and it's completely manual, but it kind of got us through until we were ready to go. And then, of course, probably the most used way is to just put that into Google. Is there an Avro Gradle plugin out there? But the thing is with that, right, this is what I come up with, and I can find that out that we've actually had about 4 or 5 different Avro plugins out there. If you don't know what Avro is, it's a serialization format for sharing data between systems. So I can do that. I can trawl through those to find out, okay, which one is the one I should be using, how do they work, and then once I find it, what do I need to do to get that into my build script? It depends on how good the documentation is for that project, if they provide that or not. So obviously this was a bit of a problem. And as I mentioned this morning, I'm constantly surprised that when I do this search for X Gradle plugin, there's always something there. There are many, many Gradle plugins out there that surprise me. And I didn't want to close that, did I? No, I did not. This isn't part of the show, I just accidentally closed the window. Talks. Come on. And we're back. So we tend to use Gradle for a lot of things, including slide decks at Gradleware. Okay, so, ta-da, introducing the Gradle plugin portal, which we saw this morning. So this is now hopefully going to be the place that people go to find the plugins. And this is what it looks like, plugins.gradle.org. Pretty straightforward at the moment, just more or less a search interface. The idea is that you know what you're looking for. I'm looking for the Avro plugin. So let me bump that up. I can see a bit of squinting going on. So I want the Avro plugin. Bam. There it is. So what do we see here? This is the ID of the plugin. We're going to talk more about why this ID looks funny compared to what you're used to. Here's a description. What's the latest version? When was the latest version released? And we have some little tags down here as well. Now the tags are clickable. Are there any other serialization plugins there? It turns out there isn't at the moment. But hopefully by the end of this conference there'll be some more things up here. So we can get the rest of those Avro plugins in here, hopefully. All right, so once we have that, we'll click on this guy. It takes us to the page for that particular plugin. And the URLs are nice. I'm just not sure if you can see that, but very friendly, persistent URLs. Plugins.gradle.org/plugin/ the ID of the plugin. And that's always going to take you to the page for the latest version of the plugin. All right, so pass that link around. You're going to get whatever the latest version is that we know about for that particular plugin listed here. And here's the ID. That, if I click that, that gives me that link as well, so I can copy that. Here's what metadata we have about the website for this particular project. So is David in the house? Yeah. So David is the author of this plugin, and he has the honor of having the first plugin in the plugin portal. So I asked him to put something in there, so David. So they can elect a website here, some information about that particular version. So here's the general description of the plugin, and here is information about that particular version. And here we have the information on how we can go ahead and use that. Question over here.
Question. I'm just curious. I know you just released this, but do you have any plans in terms of like adding ratings? Because there are multiple plugins for Avro.
Yep. So the question was, do we have plans to add things like ratings, feedback? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the kind of, I didn't make it very clear, problem with the Google search. Right, so I have all these options. I don't know anything about them apart from that, right? So very much, how often is this used? People leave comments, rate it, absolutely, very important part. So all things like that will be coming, and I'll talk a bit more about what we're going to do there as well as we go on. Okay, one other thing to show about that is if I, here's our test plugin that we use to test this stuff, Hello World plugin. It's add it to your builds, it's really good. The only other thing is if there are multiple versions of a plugin here, you get this other versions drop down here to select which one you want. So by default, you probably want the latest. That's why this link takes you to the latest version. But each version actually has its own persistent link as well. Right, so very URL friendly there. And that's really all there is to the portal right now. Now, where am I? Done it again. And of course, if you just want to browse what's there, you can just do either go to plugins.gradle.org or do a search with nothing there. And there's about 52 plugins so far. About 40 of those are from Netflix. They bombed us with plugins yesterday, but that's great to see. So, okay. Please stop doing that. So, oh yes, Alan.
If your plugin has custom DSL, where is that going to be displayed? How to use it and all that kind of stuff?
So at the moment, the idea is that plugins.gradle.org is kind of the entry point, right? So all of your documentation, any extra information you want to provide about the plugin, you can do so via, that one doesn't have a link? Yeah. So for example, take the Artifactory plugin. For example, if I want to know more than that, I can follow the link that they nominate and go and see all the information about that. We will build that out over time so that maybe it's a bit richer in the documentation you can provide there. And I'll also talk documentation as a specific topic a bit later on. But generally, it's the entry point. And detailed information will be available behind those links. So it's a searchable central directory of plugins, and we really want this to be the authoritative place where everything is. It's a link from the plugin to the author, so the plugin is there and you can track back to where that actually came from. Talk a bit more about that. But also importantly, the part you aren't seeing is the other APIs that Gradle is using to work this stuff out at runtime. So it's a resolution service that Gradle talks to find stuff out about plugins as well. Okay, so talk about getting stuff into the portal. Yes, question, Spencer.
So if you use the non-version plugin ID, how frequently or periodically, what's going to be how often is it going to actually try to reach out to the portal to resolve it?
So the question is, how often is Gradle going to reach out to the portal? So
if there's no version on when you say apply the plugin, whatever.
Okay, yep. So I believe Spencer is asking, well, I'll come back to that when we talk about the syntax.
Okay, sure.
Okay, yep. Okay, so one of the things you will have noticed is now the plugin IDs look different. We used to have plugin names. So it was apply plugin JavaScript, apply plugin Avro. And a flat namespace doesn't work globally. But there are many different Avro plugins, right? So we need to differentiate between them. But the problem we have now is there is a clash. So if you have multiple Avro plugin jars on the class path and do apply plugin Avro right now, it's kind of deterministic but undetermined which one you're going to get, right? So a couple of things about this. So we want to avoid collisions, and provenance is actually important. Whose Avro plugin is this? Does it come from the Avro project? Does it come from somebody else? That's important information. Does it come from the Gradle team? No. So provenance is now built into the IDs. And the approach so far has been first come, best serve. So the first person to create a JavaScript plugin had the Gradle JavaScript plugin. Kind of doesn't work if somebody else wants to come along and create a better JavaScript plugin. You don't have to them to call their plugin JavaScript new or something like that. So now provenance is built into the system. So qualified plugin IDs. So there's a question? How is it enforced? Well, you can't get into the... So the question was how plugin IDs enforced. You can't get into the plugin portal without a qualified ID. So you can't submit a plugin in. So we don't stop unqualified IDs being loaded the way they've always been loaded. But if you want to use this new mechanism, they need to be qualified. Okay, so it's not that difficult. The ID just needs to be broken into two things, the namespace and the name. The namespace just has to indicate who owns the plugin or where does it come from. Right, and name, what does the plugin do? So reasonable, we have a pretty strong convention for this in the Java space. We tend to use reverse domain names. That served us pretty well. So we're going with that as a standard approach. So I have a website called ldaily.com. If I produce a JavaScript plugin and I want to put that out under my name, a decent ID for that would be com.ldaily.javascript. Many people have GitHub accounts and they put code out under that. And so as another convention, if you don't have a bit larger organization or your own domain name, this is a convention I'd like to see taken up. If you want to use your GitHub username, com.github, whatever your username is on GitHub, then your plugin, and that uniquely identifies it in that space. And the org.gradle space, you can't have it. You cannot submit plugins in the org.gradle space. We will not let you. So that's reserved for things that the Gradle core team are putting out, and that comes with all the backwards compatibility guarantees and everything from Gradle itself. So that would be. And of course here, if I was looking at this, I had the choice between the ldaily JavaScript plugin or the org.gradle JavaScript plugin. I'm probably going to pick the org.gradle one. That would be the safe bet. And when you're picking namespaces, there's no need to include Gradle in there. I don't have to have com.ldaily.gradle JavaScript. The IDs are already in a Gradle kind of namespace, right? So that's all I need to identify this guy. So to use a qualified plugin ID, we just changed the name of the properties file, right? I might have called this javascript.properties before because my ID was JavaScript. Now it's just com.ldaily.javascript. Then from that point on, let's apply com.ldaily.javascript. So, oh, that's wrong. Should we apply plugin here? But you get the idea, hopefully. Yes?
You can potentially get com.gradle, yes?
The question is, you could potentially get com.gradle. Yes, I guess potentially, but do you want to be that guy? So,
I'm trying to gauge how much trust I should put into these.
well, after this, I'll block off com.gradle. How you go? So, how much trust do you have in the names? Well, the only names we're saying anything about whatsoever is org.gradle. Right? Anything else we make no statement about whatsoever. You can have your own trust built on that. So if it's Netflix or whatever, then yeah. So, but yeah, maybe we'll block anything with Gradle in it. We'll see how we go. Question, yes?
So let's say that we have certain organizations like Netflix or LinkedIn that might contribute several. Is there any idea about having, so on GitHub we can have our own,
Yep.
kind of portal within the portal. Any idea about that?
So your own kind of sanctioned namespace, is that what you're getting at?
Well, it would be com LinkedIn, but there may be many plugins under com.
So you can have com LinkedIn A, B, C, D, E.
Having a portal on the portal.
Ah, yes, okay, I'll get to that. I'll get to that.
An entry point on the portal.
I'll get to that, yep. Yep, it's coming, it's coming. Yep, it's coming. George?
Also, I asked you about the firewall earlier.
Yes.
If I have private plugins, am I still going to be able to use
Okay,
these?
so the question is if you have private plugins, at the moment, no. If this is everything you want to share with the world, when I answer Jens's question, I'll also answer that one, okay. All right, so how do you get stuff in, right? Hopefully people here have got some open source plugins they want to contribute. How do we do it? There are instructions listed at plugins.gradle.org/submits, and there's a little handy link. Oops, didn't see that. Close your eyes. This link here. So click this guy, and there's a bunch of steps here to go through and get this done. But I'm going to go through them roughly now. I can leave this as for later reading. And not as scary as it looks, just trying to be thorough there. What have I done? Okay. So the Gradle plugin portal is backed by Bintray. All right, that Bintray is the source of all that information. So if you want to play, you have to be on Bintray. I just made that up, Fred. You can take it if you want. Yeah. So Bintray is free. You can create a free account. Doesn't cost you anything. You can use the Gradle Bintray plugin to upload to Bintray, and that looks and feels much like publication does now. It's actually a bit simpler than dealing and takes care of a lot of things for you. So you create a Bintray account. That gives you a little private space on Bintray, a little repository where you can upload whatever you like. Okay? And Fred is doing a talk tomorrow on Bintray where he's going to be going through how to do this and going through the ins and outs of Bintray to do that. So we use the Gradle Bintray plugin, and I don't think I got this ready, but there we go. Check scenario worlds. So here I have that glorious Hello World plugin from before. I'm pulling in the Bintray plugin, and I have a bit of a chicken and egg problem here about using the new syntax. But anyway, so I get a nice little block here to specify what extra information I need in my POM file, because I'm publishing as a Maven module, and use the Gradle publication mechanism and some Bintray config, and that's what I need to do to get stuff. So once I have this, I get a Bintray upload task. I think that'll take care of packaging this guy up, uploading it onto Bintray into the repository I specify. So here would be the username or the organization name on Bintray. So you can have a user account, or you can have an organization account. For example, Netflix has an organization account which they post all of their stuff under. So for people like LinkedIn, etc., that's going to be more appealing than having individual user accounts. Nominate a particular repository within there. In this case, it's the Gradle plugins repo. Now, I'm going to go through this again later, but you don't have to publish to this repository. You publish to your own repository, and we'll see how we can link it in a second. Just add some extra metadata. So here we're adding a description, telling what the plugin does. Licensing that the plugin is available under. Bintray requires licenses to be there. And some labels. There's a bit of copy-paste error here, but label there as publish. So if you search Bintray Gradle, you'll find this plugin, all those instructions to get it up there. Okay, so once we've done that, what we end up with is this. So I now have a package in Bintray. So the organization I uploaded to was Gradle, the repository was Gradle Plugins, and this just happens to be the canonical repository for the portal system, but this would be your repository under your account. Now I have a bin tray package, Gradle Hello World plugin. Here's that information that I uploaded. Here's the description I specified. There's information about the licenses, etc. And another important bit of information is the website. The plugin portal is also going to use this. Oh, sorry, and also the labels as well. So bin tray is a kind of a rich system. I can specify all kinds of information, do all kinds of things here. I'm just focusing on the bits that the plugin portal uses here. So once we have this package, we now have versions of the package. So a package has multiple versions, and the versions contain those actual files. So we have a look at 0.2. We have now version 0.2 on the Gradle Hello World plugin. And it's largely the same, and the bin tray plugin took care of uploading my jar file, my PUM file, all those bits and pieces for me. And there's one very particular thing we need to take care of. And the instructions that I put up before go through this in more detail, but we need to add an extra bit of metadata to this version object to get some information to the plugin portal. So in bin tray, you can associate arbitrary attributes with versions and packages. And so for the version that I want to include in the portal, for all versions I want to include in the portal, I add a Gradle plugin custom attribute, and I do this via the UI. So if I'm the owner of this package, I hit the edit button, I go into the attributes list, and I see here's my Gradle plugin custom attribute. And the format here, it's a colon separated 3-element structure, kind of like a group name version, but not really. The first part here is the ID of the plugin. So the package name in bin tray has nothing to do with what gets presented on the Gradle plugin portal screen. This is what determines what the ID of the plugin is. And this has to match what's in your jar file. All right, so that's what we know the plugin ID to be. This is the group of the implementing jar. Right, so I'm publishing my jar that contains my plugin as a Maven module that's going to have a group and a name and a version. So this is the group component. I'm publishing this under org.gradle. And this last part is the name. So in a lot of cases, there's going to be a lot of overlap between these values, but there doesn't have to be at all. So one question.
So that bin tray package, that's separate from the actual artifact, the jar file, right? So that, because in our case, we have more than one plugin inside a single artifact.
Mm-hmm. So you can have multiple values of this attribute. So I can just add another Gradle plugin and list the same thing there. So if your jar contains multiple plugins, you'll have multiple Gradle plugin attributes.
Are you expecting in the future to be able to have that uploaded and set automatically without having to do anything?
Question was, are we expecting in the future to have this be able to set automatically? Answer is absolutely yes. There are too many manual steps in this process, and if the page that I linked to says that, yes, over time we will make this just, once you have your credentials set up, just publish this, and away we go. So we're working with the bin tray guys to open up some API to do this kind of thing, and yeah. Yes, Rob?
There is a REST API, and that's how we
Yes. Sorry?
That's how Netflix flooded the system to find
Okay, that must be new because there wasn't a way to set attributes on versions recently. Okay, cool. All right, so we should be able to fix this soon. But yes, this will happen quite quickly, so you can either wait or you can get your plugins in now. Okay, so once we've done that, so what have we done? We've created a bin tray package. We've created a version. That version contains files in the Maven format, right? So we uploaded it there. For the version we want to expose, we added this extra attribute. So this is kind of ready to go. Now we need to link the package out into 2 different places. Part of bin tray is the JCenter repository. So JCenter is effectively the canonical open source Java space provided by bin tray. It's effectively a superset of Maven Central. Everything in Maven Central is in JCenter, plus all the Java libraries on bin tray that elect to be in JCenter are there. So what you do is you go to the JCenter repository, which is bintray.com/bintray/jcenter. Come on. This is likely my wireless connection, not bin tray. Here we go. All right, so Now we've gone to bintray/jcenter, the URL bintray.com/bintray/jcenter, many ways to find it. And you say include my package. So we want to link our package now into jcenter. So we go through, find our particular package, which would be Gradle Hello World plugin. It's found something else here, but enter what you want. So now that puts it in jcenter. So those files that you uploaded are now available via jcenter. And that's a requirement of the plugin repository as well. It only obtains files through jcenter. Then we also have to link it to Gradle/Gradle plugins. So once we've set up the metadata, linked it to jcenter, linked it to Gradle plugins, we're now good to go. It's now going to show up on plugins.gradle.org. And all the data is live. So once you see it on plugins.gradle.org, if you don't like your descriptions, you don't like your labels, just go back into Bintray, edit them. A few minutes later, it's going to show up on plugins.gradle.org. So we have these are the labels from Bintray here. This is the description for the package. Let's go here. This is the website nominated in Bintray. And for each version, you can associate a description as well, which you can use to differentiate that version from previous versions, if you choose. So yeah, far more manual than what we'd like at the current time, but we are working on making this far more automated, providing more tooling around this, and I'll get to that in a second. Once you submit your inclusion requests to Gradle/Gradle plugins, you link in there. That's currently a manual step that we're watching and keeping an eye on, so that might take a little while. Once that's approved, it's about max 5 minutes to get into the repository. And once you're in, changing your data is updated every 5 minutes. Okay, so that's the portal now, the new plugin usage DSL. New in Gradle 2.1, we didn't quite make 2.0, so this won't work with 2.0 if you try it. And the structure is, open a plugins block. The ID of the plugin we want has to be the fully qualified ID, and then the version. This, when we run this build, will then make a request to plugins.gradle.org, say what implements this plugin. Where can I go to obtain the implementation for this? Then it's going to obtain that and then apply the plugin. So it's kind of the build script and apply statement in one. Almost equivalent to build script and apply. Now a few things about it. Must be the top level statement. It cannot go in a loop or a for or anything like that. It has to be at the very top of the script. Otherwise you'll get a compile error. Must be at the very start of the script. Otherwise you'll get a compile error. So both of those things together, you can't put it in an all projects syntax. A very common pattern at the moment with the existing mechanism is to do all projects apply plugin Java, this kind of thing. I'll get to why we're not allowing that this time around. It also has an extremely restricted syntax. So let's just go ahead and try this. So copy this guy, create a new Gradle project. All right, so copy paste that guy in. I'm going to use the Avro plugin here. Oops. So now if I run Gradle tasks, that should be all good, and I see the Avro tasks there. So that's actually worked. I had that stuff pre-downloaded. But if I try and do something like, okay, let's try and say if I want to do some kind of conditional application here. Right, I want to script something up. If it's Tuesday, apply the Avro plugin. If not, that kind of thing. You're actually not allowed. Right, so the only thing you can do in this plugins block is say what plugins you want, which means that it's side effect free. So no strange side effects, which means it can be executed at any time, which means if the IDE asks us which plugins are being used in this script, we can answer that question very easily without having any strange side effects. It's very important. And at the moment, no dynamic or changing dependencies. So snapshots aren't supported, version ranges aren't supported. It's likely they will be in the future. Yes, no?
Can you do string interpolation?
You cannot. So at the moment, this is more or less all you can do. Just use ID, version, One thing I haven't said so far is that if you would like to, if you prefer the syntax, you can do things like Java. To get the core built-in plugins, you can do org.gradle.java, org.gradle.groovy. Any of the core plugins can be loaded this way.
And latest version?
Latest version, at the moment, you can't. You will be able to do that, but basically via different kinds of restrictions. So latest version is one kind of request. I want the latest thing out there, but that also might mean the latest thing that is known to work with this Gradle version, that kind of thing. So part of this is conceptually I can request a plugin at that particular version, or I can request a plugin and have the infrastructure work out what should I be using for me. And something else that's detangled here, which may not be obvious, is I'm asking for this plugin. I haven't said anything about where it comes from. So the thing that provides this can be completely different. So I may have a script plugin backing this implementation initially. Then I can move that out and change it to build source, change it to something external. Or I could potentially take a build, and usually it's going to, its implementation of the Java plugin is going to be this, but I want to temporarily change the implementation to this kind of thing. So separating out what I want versus what provides the implementation allows us to do some interesting things. And we will see what kinds of patterns emerge around what kind of flexibility is needed in here. But it's a key thing for us to make sure that this can be executed very frequently and is side effect free, because knowing what plugins are available is something that's very important for the tooling. Question at the back.
Not quite sure how to ask this, but someone mentioned federated portals.
Okay, yep, it's coming. Yep. The question was federated portals, and yes, I'll get there. And how am I doing for time? Not well. Okay, so that's what you can do today. Now, there are many, many things. Get into this. Class loading and isolation. So today, when you load, one of our big motivations for moving to this new system was to provide better plugin isolation. So at the moment, each build script has a single class loader, which has all of Gradle core plus anything defined in build script. Everything is smushed together into one space. So everything has to agree effectively. And that works to a point until you have things that don't agree, of course, that aren't in your control. Also, each build script inherits its project, a parent's class loader. So you have everything you define plus that your parent has defined. It's another potential source of conflicts. Everything inherits build source. So once you add a new dependency to your build source code, that is now rippled through all of your scripts as well, potentially creating collisions. There's no isolation between plugins, really, at a class level. And chaos, but maybe that's a bit strong, chaos in the same way that most Java deployments are chaos, that nobody knows what their dependencies are. Right? It's a similar kind of situation. One thing that saves us here is Gradle core plugins at least hide their internals. You don't get our internal dependencies, but you get the internal dependencies of third-party plugins. One exception to all of this is that script plugins don't inherit anything. Now, most people aren't aware of kind of these rules until you come up against them. You get some weird stuff happening. So what's our goal? What we're moving towards is that every build script, no matter whether it's a script plugin or a build.gradle, only has access to the classes of the public API of its explicit dependencies, which means no inheritance between scripts in the project hierarchy, individual resolution of plugins, and a graph of class loaders. So you can only access the things that you said you explicitly want. Right, so you can have multiple versions of internal dependencies. You need two versions of two different plugins, need different versions of Bouncy Castle to do crypto stuff. That will be fine. So it will be opt-in. So plugins will eventually, and we're going to add mechanisms for this over time, for declaring dependencies on other Gradle plugins, make that a first-class citizen. At the moment, this is quite buried. If you depend on another plugin, how you do this is you depend on the implementation of that plugin, and then in your implementation, say, apply that plugin. That's not very visible to Gradle. We can't do a lot with that information. So we need to hoist that up so we know that plugin A depends on plugin B, and we can express that in the plugin portal as well, so you can see that information. We need to also forward declare non-plugin dependencies. We do this today. The build scripts do that, and we get it in the POM, so that's pretty much fine. And also forward declare the classes they wish to expose. Out of all my implementations and my classes plus the classes of my dependencies, what am I going to allow users of me to access? So this is how we can end up with multiple versions of the same jar. So this might sound a bit OSGI-ish if you're from that world, and that's yeah. Not that we're using OSGI, but yeah, similar kind of thing. Okay, so what's the state now? Now, there are no isolation mechanisms at the moment. So currently the plugins that you have written, as you have written them when you get them into the plugin portal, they don't declare any public API, so everything is public, so therefore they share everything. One key difference with the new mechanism is they are not inheritable. So if you have a top-level build.gradle file, at the moment in your build script you have a bunch of dependencies. They are inherited by all the child projects. Using this mechanism, they won't be. So if you take a plugin that's written today, use the plugin syntax to do it, that's not inherited down. That's the one change. Typically, that's what you want. That shouldn't cause problems. That should only just be good. So, over time, we'll add more ways for you to specify things like, I depend on these plugins, I only want to share these classes, etc. So we'll introduce this gradually. So authoring support, in parallel, we've started on a plugin development plugin. And the first point here will be simplifying the publishing, making it easier to get up into BinTray and get into the plugin portal. We've started on this. It'll be a stream that we'll just chip away at as we go. So more automated publishing, better IDE integration, which really means better authoring support. So when you set up a Gradle plugin project in Eclipse or IntelliJ, you'll have the Gradle source code, all those kinds of things ready to go there. Test harnesses and fixtures are long overdue that we provide better testing support for Gradle plugins. And if this is of interest to you, I recommend going to Justin's session later today. Talk about that. And also a documentation framework. So what we want to do is make also the portal a place where you can go and get consistently laid out, well-structured documentation for plugins in a similar manner to the way that Gradle core is documented. So the plugin development plugin will provide all of that as well. Richer plugin metadata. This will happen pretty soon. User comments. So if you can say, I used this plugin, it was terrible, I didn't like it at all. You can do that kind of thing. Hopefully not, but if it's warranted, why not? Usage stats. How many people are using this? This is a little bit tricky, so I'm not going to guarantee that we do this because there are some privacy concerns with this, but it's a potential candidate for information. Ratings, user ratings. I thought this plugin was fantastic. 5 stars, gold sticker. And also, importantly, deprecation and revocation status. This plugin is now deprecated. Please move, get off it. This plugin is revoked. It does bad things. You should get off it now, that kind of information. So having the resolution service, the plugin mechanism, talk to the central plugin portal periodically, we can pass that information down to users of plugins. So something that's also coming, centralized plugins. I mentioned that you can't put your plugins block in an all projects at the moment, which would be the analog of the all projects apply plugin Java at the moment. This needs to be centralized. So there will be a similar kind of construct, a way to say all of these things use plugin X, but it will take a slightly different flavor. The reason for this is that we have to be able to know where to go to find this information. So for this particular project, so Gradle can very quickly understand what plugins are in use. It looks at that thing and one other place where the centralized information is. So I just put this in here to let you know that we're not giving up on that nice way to say all of these things are like this. It will just take on a slightly different flavor. This is largely for performance reasons. And I guess Adam will talk a bit more about that change in pattern generally, I guess, tomorrow morning. Command line tooling, of course, be very convenient to just, while you're on the Gradle command line, say, what are all the Avro plugins? That kind of thing. Give me the scripts to do that. Are there new versions of plugins that I'm using? Be very useful to do that. What's the plugin dependency graph? So get more information about that graph of class loaders to see what's going on. So some command line query tools there as well. Yes?
So another thing would be, one thing that's very common that we see is if you have a specific type of plugin, you can apply another plugin.
Yes.
Like if you have Java plugins.
So the question being, the pattern you see is that if you have the Java plugin, then also bring in the testng plugin, but don't necessarily bring in the testng plugin only if you see the Java plugin.
No, well, as plugins with type, or sub-projects, plugins with
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Java.
Yep. So Yeah, so that's a very common pattern to have sort of plugins that conditionally build on other plugins only if they're there, right? Yeah. There will be an analog for that. It may even take the same form as the current system. Once you load a plugin via this mechanism, it's available via the same technique. So with type, all that stuff still works. Absolutely. So you could, in the implementation of your testng plugin that you load via plugins ID, do the same thing if the Java plugin is there, that kind of thing.
Well, I was wondering, will there be a better syntax? I know you said inheritance, but also we have, well, I think all of our plugins actually apply other plugins.
Yes.
Will there be a better
So if they just do it as a matter of course, so the question was, will there be a better syntax for that pattern? If they do it as a matter of course, if plugin A also always means plugin B, that information will be captured at a very high level, be forward declared for us. So we'll be able to know that that plugin depends on that plugin. We have to know for class loading reasons, but it also means that we can just go ahead and apply that.
Well, it's a rule that we want to apply, right? You have the built-in Gradle Java plugin and some testng plugin. We want to apply a rule saying if you use Java.
So you have Java plugin plus the testng plugin, and as a rule, you just always mix them together. You just have an aggregate plugin that specifies that convention, right? The LinkedIn Java plugin does that. It just composes those things together.
Actually, follow-up, is this machinery why it's recommended now to go with the with ID as opposed to with ID?
So question is this machinery why it's recommended to use the relatively new method plugins with ID instead of plugins with type? Yes, because the plugin class may not be visible on the build script if it's not exported. Okay, so kind of out of time here, and I do want to leave some time for questions. So very quickly, some future directions. More than plugins. We can use this central service to answer questions about more than plugins. We now have the beginnings of a mechanism for saying, where can I find JDK8? Give me JDK8. I need it in my build. This kind of thing. Controlling this from a central mechanism. All kinds of interesting things we can do with a central service that can answer questions intelligently. So we'll see some interesting stuff coming there. And this, more than one source. So a federated network of these portals. Yes, absolutely. And a very similar to the pattern that is well established now, where you have the everything, the Maven Centrals and the JCenters of the world. Then people have their own local Artifactory instances that may allow some things through, may also add to that. Exactly the same pattern will emerge. So you will be able to, at one stage, basically have your own instance, in a sense, of this, which provides some contextualness around the way you use it. So you may want to say, well, by default, if a plugin is specified in the plugins block without a qualified ID, if it's unqualified, then default that to com.linkedin. Right? So our plugins, we don't need to use qualified IDs for, that kind of thing. So that will be very powerful, combined with this idea that we can provide answers about more than just plugins. So in terms of when we get your hands on that, I can't say, but it's definitely in the plans to be able to do that. Plugin mapping. So I mentioned this briefly, but it's really quite a powerful mechanism to decouple I need this plugin versus where it comes from. And that's something the current mechanism doesn't have. You essentially have to do that in one step. And much more cool stuff. I think this is going to be a huge enabler for the ecosystem. I think it's going to be very useful for people who just want to use plugins. They just want to find plugins, get information about them. Hopefully it will increase the adoption of certain plugins out there by making them more visible. And really, we're really excited about the things that it enables for us to do, having this central service as well. So that's all I have, and hopefully you have some questions. So anybody with questions? Fred?
So the Gradle core plugin, they're going to go there also? If,
Okay, yep.
Native, for example.
Yep. So the question is, are the Gradle core plugins going to go there as well? Yes, definitely at some point. This is our path out of such a big Gradle distribution, yes. So
Not until after we can get through a firewall.
yeah, of course, yeah. There's lots of things to do before we get there. But absolutely, we would like Gradle to be lighter because many people might not want to use the announce plugin or a bunch of other things that Gradle ships with. We can trim that down quite a bit, which would be nice.
When you do that, please still provide an all distribution.
So yeah, when we do that, please still provide an all distribution. Absolutely, yeah. It might be very simple to cut your own kind of distribution. You might want to package up a distribution with your own plugins already preloaded, ready to go, that kind of thing.
Well, we just use our own artifact. We just have to download it once.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So we definitely want to make that much more flexible, much more malleable. Yeah. At the back.
So are you guys, am I interpreting correctly that there's a one-to-one relationship, well, that a bin tray user is the author of a plugin? That in plugins.gradle.org, you click on author, you wind up at a unique bin tray user?
So the question was, is there a one-to-one relationship between the bin tray user that produced the package and the Gradle plugin author, I guess? Is that the question?
Or namespaces, I guess.
So namespaces.
How do you prevent more than one author from writing into the same namespace?
Okay, so the question, how do you prevent more than one author writing into the same namespace? And answer is in the same way that we do this in the Java package space. Just use sensible package names, right? It's social protection, basically. It's a social issue. So, I mean, if you have the GitHub, if you're GitHub user foo and somebody's putting plugins out under GitHub user foo, then we'll use social mechanisms to try and deal with that and work it out. Hopefully, it's not going to come up. It hasn't been such an issue in the Java space with many people producing packages in different spaces. So, hopefully, we won't have to get into any kind of enforcement about that or any kind of security there. Just to back up to the author question, currently the plugin portal doesn't say anything about author or ownership. That link back to the website is the link back to whoever created it as well, because there may be a bit of an indirect relationship between the bin tray user and the actual organization behind it. But over time, we will add metadata like that in a more flexible form. Over here?
Yeah, is there like an org model in bin tray?
Yes, you can actually have an organization account. Yep, absolutely. Yes?
Maybe I just missed something, but how do we develop plugins now? If I understand correctly, we have to use plugins.gradle.org and we can't use snapshot versions. How do we develop this? Just using the old method?
So at the moment, the application, so the question was, how do you develop plugins given that plugins.gradle.org doesn't handle snapshots and you have to go through that mechanism. So for now, what you would do is when you want to test your plugin, just load it via the old mechanism. It's functionally equivalent, right? So do that for now. What we will do, and mention that the disconnect between plugin IDs and mappings, provide a way to say, well, for this build, the implementation of this is coming from this jar file over here, kind of thing. Yeah. So at the moment, use the old way. It'll get easier very soon. Yes?
Do you think that would, what is the schedule for deprecating the old style plugins?
Question is, what is the schedule for deprecating the old style? At the earliest, we'll probably deprecate it at Gradle 3. I would say, Adam? Yep.
How does that align with the feature that you just talked about for referencing local, place to pull plugins?
Okay, so we can't deprecate the existing mechanism until we have feature parity, basically is it. So once we believe we have all the existing use cases of the current mechanism that we want to support going forward, then at some point we'll think about deprecating it. So it's going to be a long road. And we will, we've done a lot of work to design the mechanism to be forward and backwards compatible. When Gradle 2.1 comes out, there'll be more information about this, but you can have plugins mixing and matching between using the new style and the old style, and it works together. So backwards compatibility is a big part of this. Yeah.
So do I take from that the ability to use the plugins DSL syntax and then follow that with a build script that allows me to also bring plugins out?
Yes, you can use plugins, and so the question was, can you use plugins and build script in the one script? Yes, absolutely. Build script goes first, and then plugins. Yep, so you can mix and match there. Yep.
Oh, build script goes first.
Yep.
I thought you said plugins.
Yeah, I was just being idealistic and saying you weren't going to use build scripts. So. Any other questions? All right, so thanks, guys. Thank you very much.